wanna do now is making it last. Mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, friends forever, strengthening the ties that keep us together. Mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, friends forever, strengthening the ties that keep us together.
How to trust again after being sexually abused. Yes, it's a heavy topic, and I have somebody who's just as heavy as I want to put it to talk about it. Welcome to Making It Last podcast. I'm your host, Noreen Daly, and with me is Pastor Latoya Wright. In her words, mom of 3 amazing kids, and she uses her journey just to share life lessons. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, how can one trust after being sexually abused? And why I have her here to have this conversation is this woman, I believe, is able to speak to this just from her own experience. But I love when people can be real. And for those who know me, they know I'm all about authenticity, about people just sharing. So, Latoya, tell us, how can one trust after being sexually abused?
And that's always $1 million question, because abuse strips your trust. It changes how you think about people. It changes your view of people, and the innocence of children who naturally trust anything and anybody. Entering into a space where they're violated, breaches that trust that they have for people who they believe should take care of them. And we have statistics that let us know the majority of offenders are people that we know. It is not a stranger. Rarely is it a stranger. Most of the time it's people that we know, and that's how we end up in those situations where we don't realize what happened. We're groomed. You can only be groomed by someone you trust and you know. And so the grooming period where you're teaching the child to trust you, to trust your word as authority, to obey you as far as with secrets, with gifts, and with all of that, it's training the mind for manipulation and the results that come from that. And so when the act of sexual abuse happens, there's now a confusion with a natural relationship of trust versus a relationship that is unhealthy for gain, for bad gain, right? It's really hard when those lines are blurred to identify if someone is really trustworthy or they're using you. And again, that's $1 million question. Like, how do we do that? Because we don't naturally know how to do that. We're not taught that way. We're just taught, take it, right? One thing I tell parents, children are very intuitive. And a lot of times we say everybody's auntie and uncle. And there are times if you say, go sit on uncle's lap, or uncle says, come sit on your lap, and the child is telling you they don't want to, we negate their voice and force them to go into a place where naturally they're feeling that there's danger, and we silence them. So by saying, go sit on uncle's lap, and the child is saying, I don't want to, you're overriding even their trust in you as a parent to come to tell you that something is wrong, because you've shown them that that person is more important than them. And so when that uncle or auntie has violated a child because their initial plea for help went unnoticed or shut down, the child doesn't know how to trust you to tell them what has happened. And so I always tell parents, listen, if a child says they don't want to, don't. Because you silence their voice from so much younger, and they really don't talk. They don't share their story. And now as adults, they don't know how to trust relationships again. My personal journey on learning how to trust, maybe with my mom, that's one example I can use, because she didn't believe me when I told her about my abuse. It was hard. We still have a very weird relationship.
Okay.
She has never admitted to me that she should have believed me. She shows in different ways, but I had to go through a lot of counseling and learning relationship dynamics in order for me to put things in their proper category and not carry someone's ignorance or inability to process information or even guilt, which is most of the times the reason why someone would say, I don't believe you.
Okay.
So I had to learn by becoming a mom that there was guilt on her end, because as a parent, you're supposed to protect your children. And she may have been thinking in her mind, she failed
you.
And her natural response, because culturally we're not taught how to communicate about feelings. We don't know how to investigate and be curious about our feelings. And the natural thing to do is to shut it off, right? So shutting it off for her translated to me that she shut me down. And she didn't believe me. So when I process that information like that, it spins a whole different story on her journey. So it takes the blame off of her and my need to hate her for not believing me. And it put things in perspective for me.
Yeah.
Well, if she was feeling guilty and she didn't know how to process that, or to say, I'm sorry, then I can't blame her for it. And it's not that I can't trust her. It is her personal experience only gave her the information she could use.
Yeah.
So that helps that heal. And I have to take that and put it somewhere else. So it's education. It's really learning how trauma works. It's learning how the mind works. And it's removing that that need to blame someone. So if I'm in a relationship with you, right? If I say you're my auntie and you've treated me well all along and you've taken care of my needs and you've never done anything to me for me to distrust you. And this one thing gives me the inclination that I can't trust you again. Well, maturity and knowledge of how this dynamic works will teach me that I can trust you. You're my aunt. You just didn't know how to relate to my trauma. That doesn't mean that I can't trust you. That means that you're probably hurting just as much as I am, and you don't know how to meet me in my space. And so entreating you to talk about it and not holding that against you releases you to be able to actually trust me to say, I really don't know how to take this information. I don't know how to process it. And it's killing me that this happened to you. I should have been there to protect you. Now, for me, that turns around and says, you know what? Wow, she's really feeling bad about this. How could I hold that against her? That's what I've learned. It took me years because immaturity and lack of knowledge, not being in counseling, I didn't have the tools of the information to process it, but I had to make sure that I became curious to find out why I was doing what I was doing, why it happened to me. And in learning those dynamics, I had these aha moments where my mom is concerned, and it helped me release that. I actually feel bad that we lost so many years because I kept blaming her and not trusting her, where honestly, she did nothing wrong.
Okay. Just to give our listeners a little context, and I because I heard some of your story.
Yes.
So I have a context in terms of what you're saying in terms of she didn't believe me. So just to give our listeners a context, what happened to you? Why, from your own experience, you can speak to this issue.
Okay. When I was very young, maybe 7 to 9, a family friend molested me repeatedly. It was an older man. He was not blood, but we call everybody auntie and uncle.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had that respect. And we used to go visit him, and he would finger me a lot. And when I finally told my mom about it, she didn't believe me. You know, my uncle believed me, but her first response was, that could not have happened because they were there.
Mm-hmm.
And but I was still very young when I told her. So what it did was silence me. Because what kids do when they come to tell you something is actually they're looking for a voice.
Mm-hmm.
Because they can't talk, they're afraid. So if they're telling an adult, they actually really need you to defend them. And when you tell them you don't believe them, you silence them, because these abusers are like Goliaths. And we're, as children, we're like little Davids.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't fight Goliaths. So if we come to another Goliath as a mom or dad or uncle, and that Goliath tells us no, then we can't fight. What happens is we become silent. And so, yeah, she didn't believe me. It hurt. It really hurt. And I felt my mom didn't love me. That was my interpretation as a little child. She doesn't love me. And it silenced me, and I didn't say anything again until many, many years later. And even when I came out as an adult, I started a ministry called Related Healing. And developed a website because my background is media and graphics and so forth. And so I built a website for abuse and domestic violence. That website just had information, pure information, and links to federal sites and other nonprofits. So it literally was a one-stop for anything that you needed to know about abuse. On the front page was a picture of me, and all I said was, using my story to help enlighten. And that ripped my family to shreds. As an adult with 3 children, my mom saw it. And when she just read that paragraph, she told me to shut it down. She said, "What the heck are you doing? Shut that thing down. This is a shame on the family." And I was like, I'm a grown woman. This is my ministry. But I did not realize that it was a trigger for her. So the way I interpret it was, even as an adult, you don't believe me. You must really don't care about me. You're right. And this is helping people. Do you really not love me? Am I really that much of a reproach for me? And that's what I thought at that point. She had me as a teenager. So I'm thinking she's blaming me for her life messing up. And every time she looks at me, all she remembers is this child who's lying about being abused. And now she's an adult, and I'm bringing a reproach on the family. And she calls my uncle. And this woman almost had a breakdown over a paragraph. It didn't dawn on me until maybe a few years later that, wait a minute, it triggered her. And that's when I asked her, is there some history that I need to know? And I asked my grandmother, did something happen to my mom that we don't know about? I said, it has to be. That thing triggered. The normal person was not triggered. For her, it sent her into a place where it was like a personal attack on her. So she has not said anything, but I guess, I believe that I have some good reason to believe that it woke up a pain in her that she did not know how to handle. And I'm processing my pain, but because I think generational St. Lucia, we island people don't explore emotions, and we don't talk about trauma. And so the heck, if we're going to make anybody see that something's wrong with us. So I think I woke up a pain in her that she projected on me. So it was like, if I expose myself, I'm exposing her. And to me, that explained that. So then I was able to release her of that response and see it wasn't anything personal with me. So I continued with my ministry, which she supports now, surprisingly. But at that point, it was really hard for her.
Okay. So now listen, now you now have the context. No,
Okay.
you said that for people to trust, it's going to take some amount of education. You said that, the idea that no need to blame. What are some of the other things that you think need to happen for people to be able to trust? And yes, we're focusing on being sexually abused, but even just other types of abuse, how then can you trust,
We need to talk. We really need to start having honest conversations. As I mentioned yesterday, we need to believe people. We need to become safe spaces for people and allow them to come into that shared safe space. I think we take things personal too much. It didn't happen. It didn't happen to you. It happened to your girlfriend, and your girlfriend is coming to you because she believes that you were a safe space, or you have made her believe that you were a safe space through every other conversation that you have had within this relationship. And so this one subject should not change the dynamics of your sisterhood or brotherhood or whatever the case may be. So not taking it personally, and definitely not victim blaming. Why did you think that happened to you? What were you wearing? What did you have on that day? You shouldn't have gone there. Da 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 da. We always try to rationalize with people about their pain. And that is the first thing to make someone shut down.
True.
Very first thing. The minute you try to tell me why it happened to me, conversation is over. We may finish talking, but in my head,
the conversation is over.
I can't trust you.
Yeah. This conversation is not over. So you will have to join us again next time for the conclusion of this conversation. This is Noreen Daly with Making It Last. Until next time.
Me, I loving you. Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.